newspapers and drapery off of these bombed out houses and wrap my feet in it, you were having trouble breathing because the snow was suffocating you. And consequently, we lost a lot of men who froze to death.
Did a little research on the Battle of the Bulge. Being my age, I should be more knowledgeable about it, but if I'm not, perhaps some of you aren't as well, but it actually took place 16 December 1944 to 25 January 1945. It involved 610,000 Americans. We had 89,000 casualties, 19,000 wounded, 19,000 killed, and it was the largest and bloodiest battle fought in World War II. And as the videos indicated, for those combatants, it was the Christmas they never had. Today, I'm very pleased to have Arnold Debrick with us. Arnold, before meeting him a little while ago, we talked on the phone a couple times. He agreed to come and share some of his experience. He was in that battle. He was a corporal. He was an infantryman, Company B, 9th Infantry, 6th Armored Division. And later on, a detachment from his battalion also was at Buchenwald concentration camp, and they were the ones on 11 April 1945 that liberated that concentration camp. It was a very horrible place. Between 1938 and 1945, there were 239,000 prisoners in that concentration camp, and 350 of them were Allied POWs, and they recorded some 56,000 in deaths. So let's welcome Arnold, if you'd come up and share a little bit of your experience.
Keep the microphone up to me.
Okay, Arnold, what made you decide to join the Army?
Well, I'd best tell you the story about it. First of all, I want to thank you for the invitation, and I'm very proud to be here, also proud to be a veteran to serve our country. And he asked how I joined the Army. I, of course, was in high school at the beginning of World War II, and Then, before I graduated, two of my buddies were called up in the draft, and I was liking to go with them. So I went to my parents, and after convincing them and the draft board as well, I was able to. And a group of us left on a train at Paola to Leavenworth to be for our physicals and induction. My two buddies didn't pass. That's the way I started. Nevertheless, from there I went on down to what is now Fort Hood, Texas. Took my basic training and went to New York Harbor, boarded the Queen Mary, went across the Atlantic, landed at Glasgow, Scotland. They immediately put us on a train, went down through England to Southampton. Then we got on a LST, crossed the English Channel, and landed at the beach of Le Havre, France. Of course, this was after D-Day. Some while after D-Day, as a matter of fact, the Battle of Bulge had just gotten into full swing. And due to all the casualties, they were needing replacements as soon as they could get them there. So I have to tell you a brief story. As we left Le Havre, there's a group of us was put on 48 boxcars. If you have any question about 48, I'll answer that later if you care to. Anyway, we no more got started down through the French timberland, and we were just all of us standing in the car, and the fellow I was standing next to, I nudged him and I said, "Hey, this is getting old. Let's see if we can't get that door open and the two of us get on top of the cars," which wasn't very smart, but we did. He had gotten a car or two ahead of me as we was traveling, and all at once I seen, hey, he took a flip-flop, and I immediately ducked, and the wire just caught didn't catch. It hit the top of my helmet. So I got down and thought this wasn't a very good idea. So I got back in the car, assuming he was laying in the French countryside someplace at the timberland. And I'll go on with that part of it just briefly. I think it was 35 years after I had gotten home. A cousin of mine from Paola, I live outside on a farm outside of Paola. He called and asked if my wife and I would like to come in to lunch. He had a fellow that he had taken training with in the United States. We went, had lunch, sat down on the couch, and he come in the living room, and first thing he said, "Was that, you remember that you and I got on top of that car?" I almost fell out the couch. I said, "Was that you?" He said, "Yes, that wire caught me right across here, but I was able to hold on." This I didn't know. This was the most pleasant surprise I can say. But I'll go on now from there. He's passed away now, but nevertheless, I did get to meet him. And as we moved on into France farther on this boxcar, we finally stopped, and was about a dozen of us was put on a 6x6 truck, and the way we went. Then we stopped and landed right in the middle of Bastogne, Belgium, which is in the middle of the night, and the center of the Battle of the Bulge was going strong there. It was being shelled heavily. Excuse me. We all jumped off the truck, went into an old shelled out building, and I had to relieve myself, so I went outside, out of the side of the building that was blown out. When I came back in, everyone was gone. I didn't know what to do. The first thing I told myself, "Dear Lord, I'll do the best I can, the rest is up to you." So I stepped out in the street, and a lot of rubble in the street, and there happened to be a chow truck coming down, trying to make its way down through the street. I ran along behind it. There was a fellow sitting in the back of it. He reached his hand out and grabbed my hand, got inside of the truck, and he asked me, "Where were you going?" I said, "I don't know. Where are you going?" And he said, "We're going out here in the Ardennes Force just outside of town, and to Company B of the 9th Armored Infantry Battalion of the 6th Armored Division." We got there, and like I said before, the casualties and the need of replacements was so bad that they take anybody without that could walk and have a rifle, never asked any questions, not anything. The only thing, Sergeant came up to me and said, "Dig in real fast and don't light a cigarette or anything, because we're being shelled very heavily," which I did. Didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about anything, any time for that matter. So we moved on, and I just done what I was told to do, and no questions or anything. We got into Luxembourg. We began to shove the Germans back some through the battles, and another fellow and myself, and I happened to be probably the youngest, or nearly the youngest one in our company, so the rest of them were somewhat older and actually began with the company back in the States. But nevertheless, I just done what I was supposed to do and what they said and this sort of thing. He and myself took a house, and by that I mean trying to find Germans in a house in Luxembourg. In doing so, the civilians were in there, and this fellow asked them right quick, "Are there any Bosch?" That's what he called German soldiers at that time. And they said, "Oh, no, no, no." Well, there was a cellar underneath the house, so we felt we'd better check that out. We went down the cellar, and there they were, the Germans. We could have had our head blown off, but fortunately, we was able to capture them. In doing so, we came back out, and this fellow was so upset about that, the one that was with me, I was with him actually. He said, "We ought to just shoot those people for lying to us." And I said, "No, don't do that. They are so scared. They didn't know what to do." So we moved on, and I'll have to say, my day-to-day, I have quite a lapse of memory, simply that some things, I'm sure it was the best for me to have that lapse of memory for another. But anyway, I can remember several incidents, and I'll go with that. We moved on, taking some more ground. Then we got out of the Ardennes Force, and we had an open area. The snow was terribly deep, it was real deep, and the sub-zero cold weather was terrible. Then we were instructed, several of us, to get on behind the tank, and what we would do then, planning to do, is move forward, get close to town. They'd fire into the town, we'd jump off under fire and try to take the buildings. In this case, we started up sort of a grade, I recall that, and the firepower from the German army was getting so heavy we had to retreat. So they hollered, "Jump off the tank, then run back." The only place we could run was right down the track of the tank. I ran as fast as I could, and I looked over to my side and watched the other fellow running. He fell down, and of course, the tank backed right over him. They couldn't see where they were backing. But time went on, and we took some more ground. And I'm getting with you on some of the events that I do recall. Many more I didn't, but nevertheless. Then I recall I got involved with a mortar squad for a short time, and then we were going to move at night over a mountainous area, and I was told to carry the mortar, and the mortars are very heavy. I've done that a good part of the night, and then we came up near the Our River, and we were instructed that, he said, "Pair up," and by that he meant dig a foxhole and pair up in there, because we didn't have any time. It was being shelled very heavily. I got there, and having carried that heavy mortar a good part of the night, I was totally zapped. I just laid down and I said, the heck with it all. I couldn't do anything. The fellow with me dug the foxhole, and he dragged me in it, and then I'm sure he saved my life, because we were shelled very heavily after that. And the foxhole, out of the foxhole, probably would have not saved me. In fact, I might mention, as you may all well know, foxholes in a forest or timber is much more dangerous than out in the open. The reason being, shells come in, the limbs of the trees detonate the shell, and then shrapnel falls all over, goes down. So being in a foxhole, there's not much protection in the woods. Well, we were told we were going to have to cross the Our River, which is one of the most scary things to do, because you're just like setting ducks on the river as you cross. But said, we'll have to get things prepared so we can get across it. Germans being just on the other side of firing at us, and we were getting our artillery in position. We spent about a week there. The snow was still very deep. Then after the first night, we broke off of being paired in a foxhole and dug our own foxhole. And I dug one, the snow being up, and I dug down into it and I just left a small opening to get into, and then long enough to get in to lay down. And believe me, when I got in there, I felt I was out of it all. I couldn't see anything, and I said to myself, this has to be the Hilton Inn. Of course, it wasn't by any means, but it was such a relief. Then, about a week went on, and then we were told to move on, and we were kind of on the bluff side of the river, and we got down right on the river, and we had all the protection they could give us, and we crossed the Our River. The snow was already beginning to melt, so the river had come up quite a little bit and was running pretty swift. We crossed the river fortunately without much incident. Then I'll go on. We made some ground into Germany. Of course, we was in Germany then. And one of the first things we came up on was Siegfried Line, which were where the German pillboxes were. And if you're not familiar with them, the one in particular I recall was just kind of a round, large dome sitting on the land that would house about 10 or 12 Germans could be in there. And they had a small entrance and then narrow slots all around the pillbox. That was for them to have their machines gun out, sticking out, they could fire. Excuse me. We were having a very difficult time taking, our squad was to take this particular pillbox. We're having a very difficult time doing that. So finally we're instructed to each one of us in the squad draw heavy fire into them right at those slots. The pillbox is so well reinforced, shells just bounce off of them. In doing that, it gave our engineers time to come and get up to it and put some TNT around it and back away and set it off. That, the concussion, killed several of the Germans inside, and those that weren't killed were so dazed they didn't even know what was going on, and they stared out. Of course, we took them prisoner. Then with just a short time, the artillery fire coming at 88s and whatever they were firing in at us, we had to take shelter in that very same pillbox. In doing so, I really don't recall how much time we spent in there. It was quite a little bit of time before we get out. I do remember one of the guys that is in with us, he said, I'm getting hungry. Another guy spoke up and he said, hey, there's one of our own tanks has been disabled just a ways out of here. And he said, I'll just crawl down there on my belly and see. He said they always have a case of D-bars in there. They always carry D-bars. I said, I'll crawl down there and see if I can't get that D-bar, a case of D-bars out of it, which fortunately he did it without, he just crawled down on his belly down there. Came back with D-bars, and I don't recall how much time we spent in there, but we had quite a long time before we had enough, was able to get out enough of our own firepower to get out of there, which we did. We moved on, and here again I'm going from one incident to the other. There was many things happening in between, but then we got to a kind of an open space, and a lieutenant came up to me and he said, we're going to hold up here for just a little while. You dig a foxhole here, and you guard and watch and see if there's any Germans coming over the ridge. Which I did. I got in the foxhole. Again, very, very tired. And to my regret, I went to sleep. And the next thing I knew, there was something poking me in my forehead. I looked up, it was a gun barrel. It happened to be our lieutenant's. And he was very upset, naturally. And he said, you know, I could have been a German. Yes, sir. And it's, you know what the penalty is to go to sleep on guard during combat. Of course, that's a death penalty. I said, yes, sir. He was very, very considerate. He realized our entire squad was worn out, just as I was. So he said, well, you stay in there, and you be sure and stay awake this time until you're relieved, which I did. Then we had a chance to move. Naturally, hard to go to sleep after that. Then we moved on. And I recall, after going some distance, we took some more ground, of course, and it came up a barn, onto an old barn. Had some hay lying on the floor. I went in there and I laid down. I hadn't had my boots or socks off, and being wet, very cold, for quite a length of time. I took them off, lying there. An officer walked by me. He seen my feet had turned black, and he immediately told me, get up. We'll have an ambulance here in just a few minutes. You're going to have to go on back. And I, of course, got in the ambulance. We went back through an aid station. They took a look. Sent him on back. Went to a hospital. They took a look. Sent him on back. I knew this was very serious. I ended up at the General Hospital in Metz, France, and immediately put in an amputation ward. And the doctor examined me, and he said, you've got a severe case of frostbite and trench foot. We'll have you, we can lay you on a bed, elevate your feet above your heart, and hopefully get some circulation back before gangrene sets in. If gangrene sets in, we'll have to amputate. And he said, that's all I can do. I immediately said, there's something I can do, and it is pray. And believe me, I spent days after days praying every day. I just couldn't, I didn't think I could live without my feet. Track was my favorite sport in high school. I loved to dance. I couldn't do without my feet, and it just looked almost evident. Here again, I don't know how much time I spent in that hospital. It's quite a length of time. And the doctor examined me every day, and there was 4 of us, I believe, in this room, something like that. And one of the fellows in there, about all we had to do is, we'd lying there, we could talk and do everything, but we had to keep our feet elevated. This fellow said, he was kind of a jokester. He told a joke on himself, and we all laughed, and he laughed. A little bit later, they come in and got him out of the room. He was gone a while, brought him back in, both feet were amputated. And I thought, well, I'll be next. But the doctor kept examining every day, and I kept praying every day. You can imagine. One day he came in and he said, "You have gained some of your circulation back. You'll never get it all back, but they need you back up on the front line. I'm going to release you." So I left the hospital, got on a 6x6, and in the meantime, a company, the whole division actually had went quite a farther way into Germany. Finally caught up with them, and it wasn't but just a few days after I got back with them, that's when we came upon Buchenwald. And I, of course, within it, I went into the camp. This is the most dreadful thing to see. I would hope no one else have to see it. I walked by the ovens, and the stench from the burned bodies in those ovens was just terrible. And worse yet, there was prisoners there yet, and they were almost like walking skeletons. To see that and realize what's happening to that country. But anyway, we got out of there, and we moved just shortly. For this Buchenwald was right near the town of Weimar. And by the way, after I'll get off that. We moved on a little further, and then we were getting right near the Czechoslovakia and Poland border. And then we got notified that we needed to stop and wait for the Russians. Well, this upset our whole squad, simply because here we'd been through the worst of it, and just being able to start making some success and ground, and they stopped us. Well, that didn't set well at all. Excuse me. Then, wasn't not very long at all, we got notice that Germany had surrendered. And then the next thing that come about, there was a road passing right by where we were camped out. And the civilians, the war was over, the Polish and the Czechoslovakians were moving on this road to go back into to their home. The only means of travel they had were either by ox cart, horse cart, or bicycle. Another fellow and myself was instructed to check these people out. And he and I were doing that. And then when there's two young boys, I would say they were not over 9 or 10 years old. And this was I'll get to the toughest thing I ever had to do. I've shot and killed, but I'll get to it. I had a very tough time even telling this, but I've gotten used to that. So I did this, so the fellow that with me, well, we found a gun on these boys, two young boys, 9 or 10 years old. Well, I get back. Right after they declared the war was over, our sergeant got shot in the lung by a sniper in the hill. And that made things worse on top of having to stop. So the whole outfit was very upset. And I know this fellow I was with, he probably wasn't thinking well. But when he seen this gun and the belongings of those two young boys, he said, "Come on, boys, we're going over the hill." I knew what he was up to. So I was carrying a cart. I followed him. Those two boys were down on their hands and knees with their hands closed, folded, praying. He was about to shoot them. Shoot them. I said, "You can't do that. That's just not right." I realized he was totally upset. I stuck my carbine barrel in his chest. And I said, "If you shoot those boys, I'm going to have to pull this trigger." Unfortunately, I'd left him. And I told the boys, "Get out here as quick as you can." So I might go back a little further. That really bothered me to have to do that, but it turned out just fine. The war being over, and I'll go back. Sometime or other, and I'll tell you why this happened, a Red Cross man located me. And he came up to me, and I'll tell you how this came about shortly. He said, "Soldier, aren't you riding home?" Well, I hadn't got mail ever since I left home. So I quit riding. Foolishly, I regret that. But when he asked me that, I said no. He said, "Why not?" I said, "I haven't been getting any mail." He said, "I am." He said, "That's no excuse. And I tell you what I'll do, being a smart aleck. You get me some mail, and I'll start riding home." Short while later, I got 112 letters all in one bunch. And then it came to my mind I hadn't been paid, which didn't matter, I couldn't spend it anyway. I hadn't even get out of thought, so I went in touch with my company clerk, and he got back with me and he said, "Oh, I found the problem, you were in dead file." So, and I'll get back to why the Red Cross was able to locate me. I can understand myself not riding home, and I regret that. After I gotten home, I found this out, that my parents were very worried, not hearing from me for a great length of time. They went to the Red Cross in Paola. We lived on a farm outside of Paola. And the Red Cross, in turn, got in touch with the Red Cross over in Germany. So that's how it come about, and I can't help but think the time when I first got into Bastogne, no one asked me any question. I just joined them. They didn't know where I was from. I didn't know where I was going. Went all this time, and that's the reason I didn't get mail, nobody asked anything. As a matter of fact, normally, of course I went in as a private, normally, as soon as you get overseas, you become a private first class. I didn't get that until later on. I was made into a corporal. So that's kind of the sum and substance of, I did go into occupation after the war was over. I had enough points. I had a point system. We had a cage staging area, and the ones with lesser points were put on the ship to go home for furlough and then on to the Pacific. But as it happened, the war was over with there fairly quick too, but I had enough points. I didn't do that. It was put into occupation. I'll just say real briefly, I hope I'm not taking up too much of your time. I had a couple assignments that I was put into the MPs. And one of my first assignments was at a German camp that had been taken over at Oberursel, Germany. And there I didn't really know what they were doing there, but the Army had taken that over, and the war criminals that they captured was taken to this camp for interrogation. And I was instructed, had my rifle on my lap. They had some houses there, small houses, to sit in a room with a fellow I found out later, and watch him, guard him, keep my rifle handy, watch anything he does. Don't talk to him or anything. Found out it was Hermann Göring. And he was the #1 henchman of Hitler. And of course from there he went on to Nuremberg for trial. Then I was done a number of things. Then I got transferred to Paris, France. This was the best job I ever had. The Army had set up a party hall or dance floor up on the second floor of the Eiffel Tower. And after going through some other assignments, I finally got up to that floor. And believe me, champagne bottles were going pop, pop, pop practically all night long. The officer in charge told me, he said, you keep an eye on things, and some of these guys coming back are gonna get plenty to drink, and naturally, a lot of them, they'll want you to have a drink with them. You go ahead, have a drink. That's the first time I was told to do anything like that. And I made a great job out of it. But it wasn't long, I was able to catch ship and go home. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try and answer them.
Since we're at the Air Force, tell them about the air power, what that played in your...
Well, of course, as you all probably know this, during the Battle of Bulge for quite some time, or for a certain length of time, the skies didn't seem to clear up. And we were depending on the Air Force to not only shoot and drop supplies, drop gasoline for our tanks, that sort of thing. And as you may have heard, I was under the Third Army practically all the time. General Patton, of course, head of the Third Army, Blood and Guts Patton. He was tough, but he said a prayer that the skies would clear up. And it was shortly after that the skies cleared up and we had the benefit of the air power. Does that answer your question?
Some of these guys here may have been.
And that was a great help.
Let me just add that this guy is part of the greatest generation. He came back after the war. He and his wife started a trucking company in 1958, I believe.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That trucking company is going strong. It's now run by the family members. And if you want to see how terrific that trucking company is, go on their website. They haul just really unusual cargo. And got some questions for Arnold. He'd like to answer them if you have.
What's the name of the trucking company?
Their name? Debrick.
Debrick?
Trucking.
Debrick, I call it.
Debrick. I'm sorry, I'm mispronounced. Debrick Trucking Company in Paola, yes?
Yes.
Right, right.
Yes.
You talked about the boxcar earlier and said if anybody would
okay.
like an explanation, I'd like
I said 48s. There is an organization called the 48s, which I'm a member of. The reason they call these those boxcars were smaller than we have here in the United States and didn't travel nearly as fast. The reason they call them 48s, they would hold 40 men standing up in them, or 8 horses. So that's where the 48 come from. And there were several of the 48s set in several places in the country. In the United States. I guess that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for
Yes.
your service.
Did you bring any souvenirs home?
I have to tell you a little bit about that.
Got the smile, sir.
Very little. Simply because we were told to be very careful. Everybody would like to find a German Luger. That was one of Germany's favorite pistols. And we were told, you better not pick up anything, it'll be booby-trapped, or could very well be booby-trapped. And one thing, I didn't see this, but I was told it happened. Some of the guys found a German Luger and were captured, and they found them with the gun stuck in their mouth and shot them. Germans just hated to see anyone else get their German Luger. So I hesitated to pick up anything. I didn't want to get my head blown off. And there's some of them that did. I just hesitate. I've got a few. I might mention one thing I did while in, this might be of interest to you, the length of time that I spent in the General Hospital in Metz. Nothing to do but lay there with your feet above my heart all time long. I took a French coin, which is softer than our silver, And I took a heavy spoon, and I was in a metal bed, and I imagine I disturbed the rest of them in our room. I kept pounding on that coin, turning it around and around and around, just kept, I don't know how long it took me to do that. Then I took my trench knife and cut the center out and have a ring. I still have that.
That's cool.
I think you kids have seen it.
It's
Yeah.
perfect ring.
Yeah, it looked just like a regular ring. I mean, it was just nothing big, but
Arnold, how old were you in 1944?
44, I was 19.
19. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you
Yes.
think that people from Paola are just a little bit better than most other people?
Well, I have to say about myself, again, I want to thank you, and I'm honored to be here, but I'm very humbled as well. I had so many of them killed, if not killed, they were injured in much worse condition than I am. And it's tough for me. A fella did tell me just recently, hey, don't feel that way. You're talking for them. So I want to make that, the guys that are gone. I'm fortunate to be here, and I want to get the word out. Another thing, I used to never talk anything about it, but I was told one day, you ought to tell some of these things. We don't want anything, and I certainly don't, happen here, what happened over in Germany. That's just terrible. If there's any indication of anything like that happened, somebody better take hold of the reins and do something about it.
Okay, Arnold and his family are going to join us for lunch, and I'm sure they'd like to have you talk with them. So thank you, Arnold, for coming out.
Thank you.
This is a challenge coin from our unit here,
Oh,
and we'd just like to have you to have that as a token of our appreciation.
Well,
for
thank you.
that.
that's great. That's beautiful. Well, along with this, I might also mention that several things I'm proud of, and I don't know if I deserved them. I did get the Bronze Star, I guess this after I got back home. And then also, not too long ago, I received the French Legion Medal of Honor. And I'm very proud to accept that, and as well as this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
You can tell me that in my